My name is Lisa Haywood, and what I'm about to share with you is something I never imagined I'd experience, let alone live to recount. On a crisp spring morning, March 14th, 2016, my life as I knew it ended, not metaphorically, but literally. I was clinically dead for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, and in that sliver of time, I encountered truths that reshaped everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the precarious future of humanity. At 38, I was living what some might call an enviable life. I worked as a freelance graphic designer in suburban Michigan, a job that gave me just enough flexibility to balance work with raising my 9-year-old daughter, Chloe. My husband, Daniel, was a reliable, steady presence, a pharmacist whose commitment to his patients sometimes felt more dependable than his presence at home. On paper, everything seemed fine, but beneath the surface I struggled with a gnawing sense of emptiness. Life felt routine, devoid of meaning. Church on Sundays, family dinners peppered with obligatory small talk, and an ever-growing to-do list defined my existence. I wanted to feel more alive. Ironically, it took dying to achieve that. That Monday started like any other. The faint scent of spring clung to the cool air as I dropped Chloe off at school and drove to a nearby cafe to work on a client's logo design. After finishing my task, I packed up my laptop and headed home, already preoccupied with the mental checklist of chores awaiting me. Groceries, bills, dinner plans. If I had known what lay ahead, I might have savoured those ordinary moments a little longer. The accident happened at the intersection of River and Oakwood, just a mile from my house. The light turned green, and I eased my car into the crossing, glancing down at my phone to double-check the grocery list Daniel had texted me. The next few moments unfolded in slow motion, a surreal blur of screeching tires and shattering glass. A delivery truck barreling through the red light slammed into my car's driver's side at full speed. I remember the split second before impact, the looming grille of the truck filling my vision, and the strange calm that came with the realization. This is it. The collision was deafening, a cacophony of metal crunching, glass exploding, and my own body being violently thrown, then silence. Complete and utter silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my body. Instead, I hovered above the accident scene, watching everything unfold from a vantage point I couldn't comprehend. My crumpled car rested at the center of a chaotic tableau. My body lay motionless against the steering wheel, blood streaking my forehead. Paramedics swarmed the wreckage, their movements frantic but deliberate. "No pulse!" one of them shouted, and the urgency in his voice carried a weight that hit me like a second collision. I felt detached, as though I were a mere observer, watching a grim movie with myself as the star. Onlookers gathered, their faces pale with horror. I spotted Mrs. Patel, my neighbour, standing on the curb with her hands clasped over her mouth. I wanted to call out to her, to tell her I was okay, or at least here. But no sound came from me. I wasn't breathing, I wasn't moving, I wasn't alive. As the paramedics worked desperately to revive me, a strange sensation began to pull at me, drawing me away from the scene. The edges of the world blurred like a fading photograph, and a warm, radiant light enveloped me. It wasn't a harsh brightness, but a gentle, all-encompassing glow that seemed to emanate from every direction. In that moment, every ounce of fear, pain, and confusion melted away, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I felt weightless, timeless, and completely free. And then I saw him. A figure stood at the center of the light, radiating a love so pure and boundless that it brought tears to my eyes. Though I no longer had eyes in the traditional sense, it was Jesus. I knew it with a certainty that defied logic. He wasn't the static, distant figure from church paintings or Sunday school lessons. He was alive, vibrant, and overwhelming in his presence. His gaze met mine, and in an instant I felt known. Every flaw, every doubt, every unspoken thought was laid bare, yet I felt no shame, only an indescribable love. "Lisa," he said, his voice resonating within me. "What you are about to see must be shared, The time is shorter than many realize, and my people need to prepare. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but before I could, he reached out his hand. The touch wasn't physical, it was something deeper, a connection that felt like it touched the very fabric of my being. Together we stepped into the light, crossing a threshold that felt like walking through a veil of living energy. What awaited me on the other side was a truth that would upend everything I thought I understood. Scenes of chaos and revelation unfolded before me, painting a picture of a world hurtling toward a deception so subtle and so powerful that even the faithful would be at risk of falling for it. I stepped through the light, hand in hand with Jesus, though hand didn't feel like the right word for what I was experiencing. It was as though our very essences intertwined, his presence radiating peace and purpose into the deepest parts of me. The veil of living energy rippled as we passed through, and on the other side the world was different. It wasn't a place in the way we think of physical spaces. It was more like stepping into a tapestry of light and sound, each thread pulsing with meaning, every vibration resonating with truth. I stood, or floated maybe, in what appeared to be an amphitheater of pure light. Scenes materialized before me, shimmering like holograms but alive, each one playing out with vivid clarity. They weren't just visions, they were truths unfolding before my eyes. "Watch carefully," Jesus said, his voice rich with both authority and compassion. "What I show you must be shared, Lisa. The time is coming when many will need this warning." The first vision emerged, its colors sharp and unyielding, as though it wanted to burn itself into my memory. I saw Earth, beautiful but fragile, trembling beneath waves of natural disasters. Earthquakes tore cities apart. Hurricanes swept through coasts with devastating force. Fires raged uncontrollably, and floods submerged entire regions. Each event seemed to ripple outward, triggering another like dominoes falling in quick succession. I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy. "Why is this happening? Is it punishment?" He shook his head gently. "No, these are the birth pains, the warnings. They will set the stage for what comes next. People will cry out for peace and safety, for someone to save them. And that is when the deceiver will rise." The vision shifted, and I found myself looking at a world descending into chaos, not just from natural disasters, but from the unraveling of society itself. Economies crumbled like sandcastles beneath a relentless tide. I saw stock markets crash in unison, banks closing their doors, and people losing access to their savings overnight. Grocery store shelves emptied as people fought over the last scraps of food. The streets were a battleground, fear and desperation fueling the collapse of civility. I felt sick watching it all. "Surely this can't happen everywhere," I whispered. Jesus looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "It will happen. The groundwork is already being laid. Humanity's increasing reliance on centralized systems, on technology over wisdom, has made it possible. These crises will pave the way for one who promises order in the chaos." Before I could ask what he meant, the scene shifted again. This time I was standing in a grand hall filled with people from every corner of the world. A man stood at the center, commanding attention with a presence that seemed to draw everyone in. He wasn't physically imposing, but there was something magnetic about him. His voice was calm and soothing, his words carefully chosen to resonate with everyone who listened. "This is him," Jesus said, his tone firm, "the deceiver. He will not come as a tyrant, but as a savior." The man spoke of unity, of healing the divides between nations and religions. He promised to restore order, to bring about a new era of peace and prosperity. I saw people nodding, their faces lighting up with hope. Even I felt the pull of his words, though I knew who he was. "He's so convincing," I said, my voice trembling. Jesus nodded. "He will speak partial truths, Lisa, but twist them just enough to lead people astray. He will appear to embrace all faiths, but in doing so he will strip them of their truth. He will promise salvation but lead many into darkness." The vision zoomed in on the man's actions. I saw him introducing technological marvels that seemed to solve humanity's greatest problems. Machines that purified water instantly, food systems that could grow crops anywhere, energy solutions that defied physics. The world celebrated him as a miracle worker, but Jesus' voice cut through the scene like a warning bell. Watch closely. These miracles will not come from God. They will bind humanity to his system, making them dependent on him. I watched as the man unveiled a global economic system designed to replace the chaos of the old. It was a digital currency, hailed as the solution to poverty and corruption. Transactions were seamless and secure, tied to biometric IDs. At first, people rejoiced at the simplicity and fairness of it all. But then the system began to tighten its grip. Social credit scores dictated access to goods and services. Those who questioned the new order found themselves locked out, unable to buy food, pay bills, or even travel. How can people not see what's happening? I asked, horrified. They will not see because they will not want to see, Jesus replied. The system will promise convenience and security, and many will embrace it willingly, even enthusiastically. They will think it is progress, but it is a trap. The scenes continued to unfold, each more chilling than the last. I saw families divided, parents turning on their children, siblings betraying one another, all in the name of loyalty to the new system. Churches that once stood firm in their faith began to crumble under the weight of societal pressure. Pastors altered their teachings to align with the new universal spirituality promoted by the deceiver. Lisa, Jesus said, his voice filled with sorrow, even some of my people will be led astray. They will mistake his false peace for the peace I offer. That is why you must tell them, warn them to remain steadfast. The visions continued, each more vivid and heartbreaking than the last. I saw how the deceiver's system infiltrated every aspect of life, from education to healthcare to religion. Yet amidst the darkness, small flickers of hope appeared, communities of true believers holding fast to their faith despite persecution. They shared resources, supported one another, and clung to the truth of Jesus with unshakable resolve. These are my faithful ones, Jesus said, a note of pride in his voice. Though they will suffer, they will also shine brightly in the darkness. As the vision began to fade, I felt the weight of what I'd seen settle over me. I turned to Jesus, my heart aching with both fear and determination. How can I make people believe this? It's so much, so overwhelming. Some will not believe, he said gently. But those who are prepared in their hearts will recognize the truth. Share what you have seen, Lisa. Warn them of the deception and remind them of my love. I will guide you. The visions continued, each one more vivid and unsettling than the last. As I stood in the light, watching these truths unfold, it felt like the weight of the world pressed down on my shoulders. The deceiver's rise wasn't just a future possibility, it was already set in motion, a carefully laid trap designed to ensnare even the most discerning hearts. Jesus' presence beside me was my anchor. His love radiated through me, a steadying force against the storm of emotions these visions stirred. I felt his guidance in every word, every scene, as if he were gently preparing me for the enormity of the task ahead. The next vision emerged, sharp and clear. I saw the deceiver standing before a crowd in Jerusalem. His voice carried a strange power, resonating not just in the ears of his listeners, but in their very souls. He spoke of unity, of breaking down barriers between nations, cultures, and faiths. He called it the path of universal truth. People from all walks of life flocked to him, their faces alight with hope, their hearts convinced that he was the answer to the world's problems. He will speak to their deepest desires, Jesus said. The longing for peace, for belonging, for purpose. But his peace will not last, and his purpose will not lead to me. I watched as the deceiver unveiled plans for a massive structure in Jerusalem, a new temple unlike anything the world had ever seen. It wasn't just a place of worship, it was a technological marvel, a blending of architecture and innovation that seemed to defy logic. Its walls shimmered with materials that shifted colors and textures, responding to the thoughts and emotions of those inside. This is not my temple, Jesus said firmly. It will be a place of deception, where all faiths are welcomed, but none are upheld. He will call it unity, but it is erasure. Inside the temple, people gathered from every religion, praying side by side. It looked beautiful on the surface, an image of global harmony, but beneath it was something far darker. The deceiver spoke from the temple's highest platform, weaving together teachings from the Bible, the Quran, and other sacred texts, yet subtly twisting their meanings. He spoke of a God who embraced all paths equally, undermining the truth that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. "They will believe he is ushering in my kingdom," Jesus said, his tone filled with sorrow, "but they will not see that he is leading them away from me." The vision shifted, and I saw how technology became the deceiver's most powerful tool. It wasn't just about convenience, it was about control. Devices that promised connection and efficiency became instruments of surveillance. Artificial intelligence systems monitored people's every move, analyzing their words, their expressions, even their thoughts. The global digital currency that had once been celebrated as a solution to economic collapse became a weapon. Those who refused to comply with the system were locked out, unable to buy food, pay bills, or access healthcare. I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy. "How can they not see it? Because it will seem like progress," he said. "The promises will blind them to the chains being placed around their souls." I saw families torn apart as the system tightened its grip. Parents betrayed children, and siblings turned against each other, all in the name of loyalty to the new order. Those who resisted were labeled as extremists, their beliefs dismissed as dangerous and outdated. Even churches weren't spared. Congregations that clung to the truth of the gospel dwindled, while those that embraced the deceiver's message grew exponentially. "He will transform religion," Jesus said, "not by destroying it, but by remaking it in his image. He will offer a new spirituality, one that feels powerful and profound, but leads only to darkness." The deceiver introduced devices that allowed people to experience what he called a divine connection. These devices triggered mystical experiences, making users feel as though they were communing directly with the divine. The sensations were overwhelming, deeply emotional, and utterly convincing. People abandoned traditional faith in droves, choosing instead this artificial spirituality that seemed so real. I saw how this technology affected even those who once stood firm in their beliefs. Pastors and leaders who had once preached the truth began to falter, seduced by the promise of unity and the lure of these experiences. Churches were transformed into centers of this new faith, their pews filled with people seeking the deceiver's version of God. "Lisa," Jesus said, his voice steady and calm, "this is why you must tell them. My people need to recognize the deception for what it is. They need to know me so deeply that nothing can shake their faith." The vision shifted again, and I saw how resistance to the deceiver's system became nearly impossible. The digital currency and social credit system had evolved into something even more invasive. A mark not physical, but integrated into human biology. It was presented as a technological breakthrough, a way to enhance health, security, and connection. But those who accepted it were no longer free. Their thoughts, actions, and even their beliefs could be monitored and influenced. "This mark," Jesus said, "is not just a tool of control. It is a declaration of allegiance. Those who take it will be bound to him, their hearts and minds given over to his system." I watched as people who refused the mark were isolated, cut off from society. They couldn't buy food, access medical care, or even interact with their families without fear of being reported. Yet in the midst of this darkness, I saw something beautiful. Small groups of believers gathered in secret, their faith unshaken despite the persecution they faced. They shared what little they had, encouraging one another and holding fast to the truth of Jesus. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said, a note of pride in his voice. "They will suffer, but they will also shine brightly. Their faith will be a beacon in the darkness." The vision faded, and I was left standing in the light, overwhelmed by everything I had seen. I turned to Jesus, my voice trembling. "How can I make people understand? How can I make them believe?" "You cannot make them believe," he said gently, "but you can tell them the truth. Some will recognize it, and their hearts will be prepared. Others will not. But that is not your burden to carry. Do what I have asked, Lisa. Speak my truth and trust that I will do the rest." His words settled into my heart like a seed, small but full of potential. The task ahead felt monumental, but with Jesus beside me, I knew I could face it. The next vision unfolded with striking clarity, drawing me into a world that felt achingly close to our own, yet hollowed out in ways I could scarcely comprehend. The threads of control that the deceiver had begun to weave in the earlier visions were now a suffocating web, tightening around humanity with chilling precision. I stood beside Jesus, the light of his presence grounding me as the scene took shape. I saw cities, bright, gleaming and efficient, yet utterly devoid of soul. Skyscrapers stretched into the sky, their surfaces shimmering with digital displays. Everywhere I looked, there were screens, on walls, on vehicles, even projected into the air. They pulsed with messages of unity, progress and security, all tied to the deceiver's system. "Look closely, Lisa," Jesus said, his voice calm but firm. "This is the promise he offers, a world free from pain, free from fear. But at what cost?" The vision zoomed in, showing people going about their lives, their movements eerily synchronized like cogs in a machine. They wore sleek, wristband-like devices that monitored their every action. These weren't just fitness trackers or payment systems. They were extensions of the global control network. Every transaction, every step, every heartbeat was recorded and analyzed. At first glance, life appeared harmonious. Crime was almost non-existent. Resources were distributed with mathematical precision. There was no hunger, no visible suffering, but the price for this order was steep. Individuality had been stripped away, replaced by blind compliance. People smiled, but their eyes were hollow, their expressions vacant. I felt a chill run through me. "The system will appear perfect," Jesus said. "It will offer everything humanity thinks it wants, but it will take everything that truly matters." I saw how those who questioned the system were treated. At first, their dissent was met with subtle warnings, social credit scores dropping, access to services restricted. But as the years went on, the consequences grew harsher. Homes were raided, families separated, and dissenters quietly disappeared. Yet it wasn't framed as punishment. The system presented it as necessary, even compassionate, to protect the greater good. "He will not need armies to enforce his will," Jesus continued. "The people themselves will enforce it for him." The scene shifted, showing a family gathered in their modest home. A father sat at the head of the table, his face etched with worry. His wife and 2 young children clung to him, their fear palpable. They had refused to accept the mark, holding firm to their faith, and now they were paying the price. Their home was isolated, their access to food and water cut off. Yet their resolve did not waver. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the room. The father rose to answer the door, and standing there was his own brother, flanked by enforcers in sleek black uniforms. The brother's face was conflicted, torn between guilt and duty. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking, "but I had to report you. I couldn't risk my own family." Tears streamed down the father's face as he embraced his brother one last time. "I forgive you," he said, his voice steady. The enforcers stepped forward, taking the family away. I turned to Jesus, my heart aching. How can people betray their own loved ones like this? "They will believe they are doing the right thing," he said. "The deceiver's system will twist love into a weapon, convincing people that loyalty to the system is loyalty to one another. Fear will blind them to the truth." The vision shifted again, this time to a church. But it wasn't like any church I had ever seen. The pews were packed, the congregation swaying to music that felt more like a concert than worship. A charismatic leader stood at the front, preaching a message of unity and self-empowerment. He spoke of love and acceptance, but his words were devoid of the gospel. There was no mention of sin, no call to repentance, no acknowledgement of Jesus as the only way to salvation. These churches will flourish, Jesus said sadly. They will embrace the deceiver's message, calling it progress. My name will be spoken, but it will be emptied of meaning. I saw how these churches grew, their leaders gaining influence and wealth. Those who resisted this new spirituality were ostracized, their own faith communities turning against them. Yet amidst this darkness, there were still pockets of light. The scene shifted again, showing a small group of believers huddled together in a dimly lit basement. Their faces were weary, but resolute. They prayed fervently, their voices a mix of desperation and unshakable faith. They shared what little food and water they had, supporting one another in a world that had turned against them. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said, his voice filled with love. "They will be persecuted, but they will not be defeated. Their faith will shine brighter than ever in the darkness." As the vision continued, I saw how the deceiver's system extended even further, invading not just people's actions but their very thoughts. Advanced neurotechnology allowed for direct interaction with the global network. People willingly implanted devices that enhanced their cognitive abilities, connecting them to a vast web of information and communication. At first it seemed miraculous, an end to ignorance, a way to unlock human potential, but it came at a terrible cost. "Those who embrace this technology will no longer be free," Jesus said. "Their thoughts, their desires, even their beliefs will be shaped by the deceiver. They will lose the ability to choose me." I watched in horror as the system grew more invasive, its control tightening like a noose. Those who resisted were few, their lives fraught with hardship, yet their faith never wavered. They found strength not in their own abilities, but in their reliance on Jesus. They were outcasts, hunted and hated, yet they were also the last bastion of truth in a world consumed by lies. As the vision began to fade, I turned to Jesus, my heart heavy with everything I had seen. How can they fight against something so powerful? How can anyone resist? "Not by their own strength," he said, "but by mine. Those who truly know me, who have hidden my word in their hearts, will stand firm. The deceiver cannot touch what belongs to me." His words filled me with both hope and urgency. The task before me felt impossible, yet I knew it was one I had to undertake. The deception was coming, slowly, subtly, but inevitably, and the world needed to be warned. The light around me began to shift, and I knew the final vision was drawing near. Jesus stood beside me, his presence a steadying force as I braced myself for what was to come. Every scene I had witnessed so far had revealed the creeping danger of the deceiver's system, a future filled with deception, control, and division. But as the light pulsed around us, I sensed something different, something powerful. Hope. The vision opened to a world in chaos. The deceiver's system had reached its full strength, a global machine so intricate and unyielding that it seemed impenetrable. The streets were eerily quiet, the once bustling cities subdued under the weight of constant surveillance. People moved like shadows, their lives dictated by algorithms and scores. Yet even in this darkness, there was light. I saw them, small groups of believers hidden away in basements, forests, and abandoned buildings. They were worn and weary, their faces marked by struggle. Yet their eyes shone with a peace that defied their circumstances. They prayed together, sang hymns in hushed voices, and shared what little they had. These gatherings were not just acts of survival, they were declarations of faith, small but radiant fires in the midst of a cold and unfeeling world. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said, his voice filled with love and pride. "They will endure because their strength comes from me." I saw how these believers found ways to support one another, forming a network of faith that transcended borders. They shared scriptures written on scraps of paper, passed messages through trusted allies, and spread the truth quietly but powerfully. They clung to the promises of Jesus, their hope rooted not in their own abilities, but in his unshakable love. The vision shifted, and I saw the deceiver's true nature finally revealed. For years, he had cloaked himself in the guise of peace, offering unity and solutions to humanity's greatest challenges. But now, his mask was gone. He demanded worship, not as a benevolent leader, but as a god. His followers, bound by the mark they had willingly taken, fell to their knees, their eyes glazed with an unnatural devotion. "He will show his true face," Jesus said, his tone heavy with sorrow, "and those who have given themselves to him will be bound, unable to see the truth." The deceiver's power seemed absolute, his reach limitless, yet even as he tightened his grip on the world, the faithful stood firm. I saw them resisting not with weapons or violence, but with unwavering faith. They refused to bow, refused to take the mark, even as they were hunted, isolated, and condemned. Their strength was a testament to the power of Jesus within them, a light that could not be extinguished. The scene shifted again, and I saw a glimpse of what lay beyond the darkness. It was brief, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a long and oppressive night. The faithful, though small in number, stood victorious. Their suffering had not been in vain. Jesus' return was near, and with it, the restoration of all things. I saw him descending, his glory shining brighter than the sun, his presence undeniable. The world that had been so consumed by lies and chaos now trembled at the truth. "The victory is already won," Jesus said, his voice both tender and resolute. "But the battle must still be fought. Tell them, Lisa. Tell them to stand firm, to trust in me, and to prepare their hearts. The time is shorter than they realize." I turned to him, my heart full of questions and fears. "What if I fail? What if they don't believe me?" "Your task is not to convince them," he said gently. "Your task is to speak the truth. Those whose hearts are prepared will hear it. Trust me to do the rest." His words settled deep within me, a seed of faith that would carry me through the challenges ahead. As the vision began to fade, I felt the pull of the earthly world returning. The light dimmed, and the sounds of distant voices grew louder. I clung to Jesus' presence, not wanting to leave, but he smiled at me with a love that I could feel in every part of my being. "Go now," he said. "Tell them, I am with you always." Suddenly I was back in my body. The transition was jarring, like being plunged into cold water. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, my eyes flying open to the sight of a hospital room. Machines beeped around me, and the faces of nurses and doctors hovered above, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. "You're awake," one of them said, her voice trembling. "We thought we lost you." I had been clinically dead for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. To the medical staff, it was a miracle that I had survived at all, let alone without any signs of brain damage. But I knew it was more than a medical anomaly. It was a mission, a calling from Jesus himself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and questions. How could I share something so extraordinary, so otherworldly, without sounding unhinged? Some dismissed my story as a hallucination, a desperate trick of a dying brain. Others listened with wide eyes, their spirits stirred by the truths I shared. I began to see the signs Jesus had warned me about: the rapid advancement of technology, the growing push for global unity, the subtle erosion of absolute truth. Every day, I felt the urgency of the task he had given me. The world was changing faster than anyone realized, and the foundation for the deceiver's system was already being laid. Digital currencies, biometric IDs, AI systems that could predict and influence human behavior. It was all happening, just as I had seen. But alongside the warnings, I also carried hope. I saw it in the small gatherings of believers, in the quiet moments of faith that flourished even in the darkest corners. Jesus' promise was clear. The battle would be fierce, but the victory was already won. And so I share this with you now, not to frighten, but to prepare. The deception is coming, wrapped in promises of peace, progress, and unity. It will be subtle, so cunning that even the faithful may struggle to see it. But Jesus' love is stronger than any lie, his truth unshakable. Cling to him, hold fast to his word, and do not be afraid. The time is short. The choice is clear. Will you stand with him